never thought I'd be glad to leave her behind. That's what I told myself when I left the cabin. I told myself I needed to escape. I was suffocating in that house. The dust, the silence, the shadow of the plantation hanging over everything. My grandmother, who raised me with such fierce love, could never understand why I needed to go. But she always told me to follow my path, even if it meant leaving her behind. You have to go, Reed. You've got a future, she would say, every time I thought about staying. I thought I could handle it. Thought I could make a new life for myself at college. I thought the distance would help me forget the weight of that cabin. The way the past seemed to linger there, never quite gone. But now, sitting on this train, the envelope in my hands, it feels like I've never left at all. She's gone. The lawyer, or whatever he was, he came to me in the city a week ago. A cold man, with his gray suit and his dull, monotone voice. He said my grandmother had passed, that she'd left everything to me. Everything. The plantation, the house, the acres of land she kept alive with memories and little else. All of it was mine now. There was a part of me that wanted to tell him no, that I wanted nothing to do with it. But I couldn't, because I knew what she wanted. She always wanted me to take care of it, to keep the legacy alive, even if it was a broken thing. The sugar mill had been dead for years. The fields were overgrown, the house was falling apart. But it was still ours. And now it was mine. The train rattles on, and I open the leather-bound ledger the attorney handed me. It smells like dust and old paper, the kind of smell I remember from when I was a kid and would sit in her lap, listening to her stories. Her handwriting is neat, delicate in a way that doesn't match the strength I remember in her voice. She used to talk about the plantation, about the history buried in the land like it was some living thing. She never talked about leaving it behind, never spoke of selling it. It was always ours, no matter how run down it became. I flipped through the pages. Her notes, her calculations, and then there it is. The chest is buried under the old oak. 88 silver coins. If the time comes, it will be yours to find. I read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. My heart starts to race, and I feel the tightness in my chest, the one I've carried with me since I left that place behind. A treasure? Buried on the property. I never knew. I don't know why she never mentioned it, but maybe that was her way of testing me. Maybe she knew that someday I'd need a reason to go back. 88 silver coins. I can't even imagine how much they could be worth. If I found them, I could sell the plantation. The whole thing. I could finally escape, pay off my student loans, maybe even move far away, away from the house, away from the ghosts that linger in the corners of my mind. But it's wrong, isn't it? My grandmother, the woman who raised me, who taught me everything about loyalty and family, wouldn't have wanted me to think like this. She would have wanted me to take care of it, to restore it to what it once was. She never gave up on the land, even when it seemed impossible. She poured everything into it. I let the ledger fall open to the next page, my fingers trembling. I've kept the farm alive with hope. Read. But it's time for you to decide what you want. Don't carry the weight of this place on your shoulders forever. Her words. But it's not enough. I can't help but feel like I'm failing her by thinking about selling it. By thinking about walking away from the one thing that kept her alive for so many years. But I know deep down that I'm going to do it. I'm going to find those coins. I'm going to sell the plantation. I'll bury the past for good. And still, I can't shake the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, my grandmother knew all along that I'd be the one to end it. The one to let it go. The train clatters along the tracks, and the sky outside turns pale, as if it understands my dilemma. I stare out the window, fighting the guilt creeping up on me. It's wrong, but I have to do it. I have to. I can't live like this anymore. I can't live with her ghosts. When I arrive in Merrow's Hall, it hasn't changed. The town looks and smells exactly as it did when I left. The sun hides behind a haze of sickly yellow clouds, and the cicadas sing in the stale, wet heat. I feel suffocated and watched. There's no reason to linger in town. After the train leaves, I walk across the tracks towards the old road that leads to the plantation. The road is overgrown, unpaved, and with a strip of grass running down its middle, as wagon ruts became tire tracks, and eventually it was all just a path. I brought my backpack with me because I expect to make this quick. I'll visit the plantation, unlock our cabin, and pack her things. I know a grocery delivery found her, and she was on the front porch. They say she was sitting in her chair, there, just staring. Somehow, I still expected her to be there. I wasn't mourning her yet. I hadn't really realized what it meant that she was gone. When I got there, a strangeness was waiting for me. It was early evening and there were no lights on in the cabin. It suddenly hit me that I was alone without her. I'd never see her again. Somehow the pain of losing her had waited. I sank to my knees and started to cry. When I unlocked the door and went in, I realized the task before me was far greater than I had allowed myself to realize. Packing all her things, selling the plantation, digging up a treasure. It wasn't going to be a quick visit and it wasn't going to be easy. I make some tea, feeling how she must have felt, like the ghosts are all I have left. Your great-great-great-grandfather was a slave. When he was freed, he built this place. This plantation is our family's legacy. My grandmother had told me. There's this fear in me of knowing too much about the past. She knew and it haunted her. The first night at home is always the worst. That's how it should be anyway. Perhaps the past should just stay buried. Perhaps it has no place in our lives. I could hear how the past walked around, searching for itself. It was out there in the night. I listen and it stops and knows I listen. I look, peering into the creaking darkness, and it is looking back at me. I can feel it angry with me, judging me. My nightmares are a cold sweat, and when I wake up it is still dark, still night. Shouldn't it be morning? I light a candle, humming to myself to try and alleviate the vague sense of dread. Why is the front door open? It is so dark, and I feel a chill. I look and see that someone is there. Someone is standing in the cabin, just a dark figure, hunched and menacing, holding a pearl-handled cane. Who is there? I want to say the words, I want to ask them who they are. I want to speak, but there is a fear growing inside me. It starts out like a dream, as though nothing is happening at all, and then the fear rises, growing ever more solid and threatening. I am gripped in silent terror, my trembling hand holding the only light, the flickering candle. I see that it isn't a someone at all, it is a something. Something from the bayou, something dripping and moving towards me. Why is it here? My eyes shut and open, and it is closer, slowly closer, and I am trapped, cornered in my bed. It has eyes, pure white glowing orbs beneath a black veil. It is staring at me, approaching me, and it uses the cane, coming ever nearer. If I didn't wake up, it would have stood over me where I slept, its silent form and that cane. I sensed it was a weapon, and it would break every bone in my body if it got close enough. Panic floods me and I drop the candle, turning to run for the window in the back. Now it makes a sound like a kind of sigh, a kind of moan. It makes a sound that is almost like a voice, almost like a wind. It is a gasp, a frustrated empty noise, like air being sucked into the void of a coffin. This thing, it is from a grave. As I open the window, the smell betrays this fact. Something unliving that walks again. When I am outside, I turn and look, my panic subsiding after I escape. Cannot believe what I've met. I see it is like a woman, staring at me from the window. She is vengeful and awake, staring pitilessly at me. I'm out. I'm gone, I say to her. I take off running towards the road. Something catches my foot and I am falling. I don't hit the ground. I am falling for too long. When I open my eyes, I am in a ditch. I've hit my head on a pile of branches. I feel a kind of numbness in my cheek and an ache that feels like it stopped bleeding hours ago. I pull a piece of wood out of my face, with relief and agony intermingled. I discard the bloody splinter and climb out of the ditch, my clothes torn and muddy. The sun has risen, and I think I'm safe now. I see her there, in the daylight, a dark figure, searching along the road, her back to me. I leave the ditch and return to the cabin, locking the door, shutting the window. I see her out there. She knows where I am now. She saw me. I have to get out of here. I know she'll kill me, beat me to death with her cane. Whatever she is, she moves slowly, but relentlessly. I am worried the lock on the door won't stop her. No, that or I am trapped inside with her out there. The ledger is my only friend. There are photographs in there of my ancestors. On instinct, I search among them for an answer, and I am rewarded with one. Sometimes it is better not to know. What are you? I stare at the photo. She looks blind, but she can still see me anyway. I have made her angry. I go to my grandmother's desk and begin searching among her papers for any clue. It is all I can do. That thing is out there, and she is circling the cabin. Could I outrun her? Somehow, I don't think it is possible. Wherever I go, the window, the door, she is always on the other side. Sometimes she moves so slowly, of course I could outrun her. Then she just appears in front of me. No, there is no escape if I make a break for it. With the door locked, she doesn't seem to be able to come inside. My research finds me in the pages of an old diary. I find out who Sugar Cane was, her strange name, her cane and her blindness. Except she could see things in people. 100 silver dollars for the land and house. I read, dollars? I read how my family had cheated her. She was allowed to live in the very cabin I was hiding in, while we kept the house and the sugar mill and the land. The money, or most of it, was still buried somewhere. Let me make it right, I said through the door. I felt her rage, awakened somehow by my own greed to sell the place and take the money. I'll leave it all to you. I'll just go back to school. Just let me bury my grandmother. I opened the door slowly, flinching, worried she would end me anyway. One blow from her cane and my bones would shatter, like in my nightmares. I watched her go. She sat beneath the old tree between the cabin and the dilapidated house I was never allowed to play in as a child. I stared, my eyes fixed on her, but it was as though she were part of the ground, the tree, blending in with the darkness of the shade. Then I couldn't see her. I was still looking where she had gone, but it was like she was always there, just part of the place. I took my backpack with me, leaving everything as it was. My grandmother was to be buried in the cemetery in Merrow's Hall. I left the plantation behind, never to look back. I'll pay my debts on my own, make my own way in this world. The ghosts can keep what belongs to them. When I put my grandmother to rest, I tell her I have made things right, and that is how it will remain.